Hi. You notice that somebody has joined us here? My Russian nesting doll friend. I guess because we're going to be studying lesson 87, which is on Vladimir the Great. Has to do with Russia. I picked her up in Moscow. Yeah, I do have a very sweet heart towards Russia as I think about the memories there. And I've gone and traveled a lot there, doing conferences, going to orphanages, sharing the gospel on the street. We even went into the colleges and in the English classes and got to share the gospel with them. And from all the way from Siberia to Novgorod to Moscow to St. Petersburg. It's been such a wonderful journey. My friend and I journeyed. She does concerts, and we journeyed on by train all over where she did the concerts, and we were able to share the gospel with a lot of young people. It's been such a wonderful experience, and so every time I talk about Russia, I always get this, tinge in my heart. Anyway, I wanted to share a picture with you. This is a lady that I met. You can see it's not glaring too much. And I met her when we were traveling by train to Siberia. We were just waiting for a train, and she was walking by. We were out in the midst of nowhere, and she came over. I gave her a Gospel John, and she gave me a kiss in the cheek. She kissed the Gospel John. She smiled, and so she became my friend. And so we took a picture. Somebody took a picture of us, and I keep this as a souvenir to remember Russia, the amazing thing of Russia. Well, there's a lot of different things you can see in Russia that have to do with Russian history. We're going to be talking about Vladimir in the mid-1400s, and the reason that Vladimir is so popular is because he united all of Russia into one. But because the 1400s, Russia was in all these little groups. They all had their grand dukes and these little country cities together, and they all had to pay the Mongol tribe, the Gordon Horde, tribute. His name was Saray Batu, and they paid him because they were afraid for the Mongols to attack them. So the Mongols kind of controlled the area. Well, Ivan then stood up. He was the one that stood up and said, "No, we're not paying you anymore." He wasn't afraid. And so instead of the Mongols attacking, which they figured they would, they didn't. They were actually afraid and decided not to. So suddenly Russia became a united power in Europe there, in that whole area, and actually became what Russia is today. So Ivan, a little bit about Ivan. He was born in 1440 to Vasily. They were fighting. The brothers actually were fighting amongst to see who would be able to become the next heir. He was declared heir when he was 6 years old. At 12 years old, he was supposed to be engaged to be married at 12 years old to young woman who was the Grand Duke, Prince Tver's daughter. Maria was her name. Well, he grew up, he was going to marry Maria, and at 22, Vasily died, and he became that Grand Duke. And he acquired all of northern Russia, and Novgorod at that time was the most important city. And if you go, let's take a little break here because I want to show you a picture. If you go into your book, you'll see this picture. Hope you can see it. And it's a monument, and I've seen that in Novgorod, and it has 1,000 years of Russian history on it. I wanted to share that with you because it's kind of important, because we kind of have to backtrack to see, where did Russia come from? On that, if you look on that figure, you'll see, and follow along as I explain it. First of all, it was erected in 1862, and it commemorates 1,000 years of Russian history. It weighs 100 tons. The first warrior you see on there is Rurik, and he is of the Varangians in 862. he was actually one of the settlers, and he was a Viking. And his grandson was named Vladimir the Great. We know a lot about Vladimir the Great because he was this Viking, like the Beauty and the Beast figure. He was the Beast. He actually had all these wives, and he ended up going down to Constantinople and marrying Anna, one of the sisters of the emperor down there. And so she came up, and they ended up basically bringing Christianity into Russia. And you can see him with the cross. And then Yaroslav the Wise was the son of Vladimir, and he promoted Christianity. You see Olga, which was his grandmother in that picture too, who also was a promoter of Christianity. You see Anthony, the monk there, and he's the one that started the monasteries there, and the monasteries were in caves. Methodius and Cyril, remember them? They were the missionaries to the Slavs, but they also started the Slavic alphabet that now is the Russian alphabet. In the center there, you'll see the close-up of Ivan, and he's the one, basic one, main one in that picture, who basically became the first Tsar and the first great leader of Russia. Ivan's wife Maria died in 1467, and 5 years later he married Zoe, the niece of Constantine the Sixth. He was the last emperor of Constantinople before the Ottoman Turks took it over. Zoe changed her name to Sophia, and they built one of the largest Orthodox cities there, called the Third Rome in Moscow. They built what's called the Kremlin, most beautiful fortress there. And when anybody would get attacked, they could run into the Kremlin and find safety. It's very beautiful, built of red brick, and then there's a 90-acre complex there on the Moscow River that's kind of a triangular shape, has cathedrals, palaces, an arsenal, an army, gardens. Outside of it, it was very beautiful with 5 gates, 29 towers, and it's where the head of the Russian Orthodox Church is. Ivan the Great also built this big bell tower, 266 feet. And after the death of the Tsars, they would be buried there. He died in 1505, and his son Vasily became the Grand Duke. He ruled for a while, and then he had an infection in his foot, his leg actually, and he ended up dying. And his son Ivan the Fourth became the Grand Duke 1530 to 1584. This Ivan was very cruel and had very outbursts of anger, and sometimes went really crazy, and they called him Ivan the Terrible. We won't get into him right now and what he did, but he wasn't a very good guy. In fact, he was very paranoid, which meant he was afraid that people were after him all the time when they weren't. So he hired these secret police to go around, and if anyone he thought didn't like him or whatever, he'd have them killed. He ended up in a fit of terror, actually murdering his own son. So he was a pretty bad guy, but after that, we come into some other czars. As history goes on, and there's quite a minute, but we'll stop right there. But anyway, it's so fun, isn't it, to study history and to know that every place we visit has a history, and that God's watching down on us, isn't it? Good night.